Good morning, everyone in Europe, in Brussels and elsewhere at the European capitals, and almost good afternoon, everyone in Turkey who is watching us on this very important day, March 8th, International Women's Day. And we are here today with a very important group of panelists coming to you partly from Turkey and partly from Brussels, with the participation of important civil society organizations, worldwide civil society organizations, and of course, International Press Institute, IPI, based in Vienna. And of course, we had contribution from Committee to Protect Journalists, Human Rights Watch, and European Union Commission to put together this panel and to get ready for this discussion that you will be participating today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce my fellow panelists, starting from Mr. Nacho Sanchez Amor. He's the European Parliament rapporteur for Turkey. And then we have Elif Ege. She's an activist. I don't want to say a woman activist. She's an activist, and she's been campaigning on many different projects in Turkey, and people who are following the women's issues in Turkey and also LGBTIQ issues in Turkey are familiar with her name. And then we have another activist, and maybe some would like to call her a feminist, Rümeysa Çamdereli. She's also involved in many projects in the same field, and she's also well-known and outspoken critic of the violence against women and children in Turkey. And we also have a very good colleague of mine, a very good friend of mine, Melis Alpan. She's an independent journalist, and we worked together in the past in Turkey's once, which was called mainstream media together. And Melis is also a very outspoken journalist. She has put important work in this area to raise the voice of helpless girls and women, and to bring the issue to Turkey's agenda as well as the international agenda. And we also have Olga Martin Gonzalez. She is the Gender Equality Coordinator in the European Union's Director General NEAR. And if I'm not mistaken, this DG is working on the candidate countries, right? So before we give the microphone to our female the panelists, I think it will be really important to hear from Nacho, our rapporteur for the European Parliament. He has kindly agreed to be with us today as the only male speaker, the male feminist in the room today. Thank you very much for being with us today and agreeing to be the host of this important panel. And the floor is yours.
Sorry. Okay, thank you, Tenso. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, dear friends. It's a pleasure and an honor to share with you this March the 8th. I feel a little bit intruder. I have to underline what Chansu said about my presence here. But you know, I'm conducting for the last month a monthly meeting with NGOs in Turkey that are committed with an enormous field of actions and plans and rights. And sometimes these meetings, because the meetings are a reflect on what is happening in Turkish society, are not very happy or very enjoyable, because we are talking a lot about the problem, but that creates a feeling of community that I really share, and it's completely useful to my knowledge of the situation in a frequent day. It's not just to receive the papers, it's just is about to talk to the people who are suffering this idea. The initiative to dedicate this meeting to the women's situation came out in one of these monthly meetings, and of course we all decided to do that way. This is completely timely, and I would like to thank to International Press Institute, to Human Rights Watch, the Committee of Protect Journalists, and the EU Turkey Forum, that is one of the bodies, informal bodies in the European Parliament dealing with the relation of the European Union with Turkey. There is so many issues in the agenda of human rights and liberty in not only human rights. There is so many issues in the relation between European Union and Turkey that sometimes I feel the human rights agenda is not in the front page as it was recently. And I show my concern because this development, and I show my concern because the Council of the European Union, that means the member states, are more keen to be focused on geopolitical aspect of relation, what is happening in the Eastern Mediterranean, on the drillings, on what happened in Nagorno or Libya or Syria, and the member states, in my view, are being lazy input the human right agenda and the liberties and the rule of law agenda at the core of the relation with Turkey. I could understand that the realpolitik probably has that consequences, but I'm completely upset sometimes when I see the conclusions of the Council when they talk about the relation with Turkey without any single mention to the human rights and rule of law issues. And for that reason, and because the Parliament always has been the flagship institution on human rights issues, we from the Parliament, and me myself as a rapporteur, I always try to introduce this aspect of the relation in the front page of our relation. The other issue I would like to convey to you all in a more general terms is the accession process. You know, there is a lot of voices in the European institutions and even in the European society asking for a complete termination of the accession process. Because, in my view, Turkey is not delivering the reforms they commit to do in the past, and there was a kind of European fatigue. I heard a lot about the European fatigue in Turkey. There is a kind of Turkey fatigue in Europe, because there are no real reforms, there are no improvements, and for that reason there is a lot of people asking, we are done with Turkey, we have simply to terminate the accession process. My great fear is that the only leverage we have to protect the pro-European, pro-democratic society in Turkey is the accession process, because the accession process legitimizes our intervention, our opinion, our clear and loud voice on internal issues, because Turkey is a candidate country. If we simply terminate the accession process, Turkey is going to become like Kazakhstan. Okay, we could be very vocal, we could approve some resolution, but they are not real. These political aspects are not touching the society. For that reason, I always ask to my friends in the NGOs in Turkey, please consider that the accession process has to be kept, has to be maintained if you want to receive not only the financial support, this is not important, the moral support of the European institution. And for that reason, I ask you, when you talk to European interlocutors, don't forget to mention that from your point of view, the accession process is a kind of umbrella trying to protect you incompletely, with failures, with difficulties, but is our best tool to protect the pro-democratic, pro-European public opinion in Turkey. This is a moment in which we talk a lot about positive agendas. Well, let's see, I'm a little bit skeptic. What I say to the public opinion in Turkey and to my official interlocutors, please don't send me more love letters. Don't send Europe more love letters. Send facts. And I could understand that the action plan on human rights recently approved could means trying to certify that there is a different approach. It's very recent. It has happened overnight. Probably it's related with the problems with the prospect of sanctions. I don't know. But what I always say to my interlocutors, send me facts, positive facts. Please don't send me more 100 pages plans. Send me the court rulings, because if you approve enormous plans of reforms of the judiciary, action plans, at the end, your prosecutors and your judges are acting the same, this is not delivering. You are not approaching our standard, and we can in any way endorse the sincerity of your attempt to real reform. Well, this is the March 8th. This is about you, about women. This is an international problem. Please be aware that the problems you suffer in Turkey, in different extents, are in any society in the world. This is not the thing about a religion, about a geographical part of the world. Unhappily, this is happening elsewhere, and the fight has to be fought elsewhere in the world. And for that reason, you have to unite your effort with the rest of the feminist movement in Europe. We all know that there are some cultural or religious backgrounds in every society, and I don't want to talk about one particular religion. My country has been a Catholic country for centuries, and that cultural background affected a lot the question of the women's rights in my country. Luckily, we try to overcome the situation with the secularization of the societies in the Western Europe that gained some ground, and the restraint that could come from this religious or cultural background are weakened than other parts. But elsewhere in the world, there is a fight, and especially about violence, because violence against women and girls is so deeply enrooted in these, even inconscious cultural roots, that the fight, it has to be constant, has to be clear, has to be every day of the year, or not only the March 8th. But well, you know, my intention here is to hear from you. Is my main role in this kind of meetings that we have every month is to hear from you, and I'm very happy to have the opportunity to hear the other panelists, because I'm working in my report. Of course, we are touching the issue of women, but there is so many issues in the report in every aspect of the rights and liberties that this is one of the issues that I would like to raise today, and to send a message to the Turkish society, to send a message to the Turkish women, to the Turkish authorities, that the European Union has been and always is going to be watching what are your policies on women's rights. And we had two main concerns in the past months. This blurry announce of withdrawing the Istanbul Convention, that is absolutely worrying for the European side, is completely unacceptable. I think in some way it's like the death penalty issue. Is that you can go backwards in the core issues of the equality in the society, and I think Istanbul Convention could be a red line for the European Union. And the question more subtle, more difficult to approach is the early marriage of girls that have several aspects linked, mainly religion, mainly costume, I don't know, but there has been the most pungent issues we had to tackle with in the last month. But it's your time, dear friends. I'm listening carefully what you are saying, and I'm trying to convey to my European colleagues your worries, your concern, and your hopes in this particular day. Thank you.
Nacho Sanchez Amor, thank you so very much for your candid remarks. And I am apparently very happy to hear that you are also in a way self-criticizing the European Union's position in the sense that it's not making these issues the headliner issues. We have so many political problems between Turkey and European Union, and that's why, unfortunately, unless we have a day like this, the human rights abuses and violence against women and children are not the top priority for the European capitals, and we hope that changes in the near future, at least a little bit. And now I would like to turn to Elif Ege. She represents one of the biggest and well-known women's organizations in Turkey. For the ones who are not familiar, I'm sure most of the participants today are familiar with Mor Çatı. It's a Kadın Sığınağı Vakfı, as we say in Turkish, but I'm sure Elif will tell you more about her organization. And Elif, I would like to ask you about your take on the latest state of women's issues in Turkey. And as Nacho touched upon, the Istanbul Convention has been very much in discussion in the course of the last year, but maybe it's just as Nacho said, something to be brought on the agenda when the government wants to change the political talk in Turkey, and then it's put back in the refrigerator for some time. So why did we discuss Istanbul Convention for a long time during the course of 2020, and now we are not discussing that much anymore? And what is the state of the women's rights and the violence against women in Turkey as of today?
Thank you so much, Cansu, and thank you for everyone for organizing this and for participating in this event with us. As you just asked, I am going to be talking a little bit about the political atmosphere in Turkey and its effects on the issue of violence against women. But before that, I just want to briefly tell you a little bit about Mor Çatı. Mor Çatı Women's Shelter Foundation was founded in 1990 by feminists in order to combat against male violence. In Mor Çatı, we employ a feminist perspective regarding male violence, by which we mean that male violence derives from inequality within the society, the inequality between man and woman, the gender inequality. And we know that it has to be dismantled by establishing equality within the society and by fostering women's solidarity. What we do here in Mor Çatı is that we monitor and report on the implementation of both international conventions and domestic laws and regulations. And we make policy recommendations to relevant authorities and decision makers. We try to put pressure on them by writing some reports and etc. But the most important part of our work is that we provide direct support to women who experience domestic violence. We know that survivors of domestic violence help us reveal the shortcomings in the implementation of the existing laws in the field, and it shows us how to change those laws, how to come up with agendas to change those laws based on the experiences of these women. I first of all want to talk a little bit about this political atmosphere, as you just mentioned. There is a lack of political will in Turkey in terms of establishing gender equality. That is like as simple as that, basically. We see this in the state discourse in which the leaders, the high-level officials consistently and insistently state that there is no such thing as gender equality and man and woman can only be complementary to each other. This has been going on since 2002, but we want to focus on the period after 2010, where these officials started to make these statements more like clearly and visibly, more loudly. In 2011, we saw a shift with the name of the ministry. The Ministry of Women and Family Affairs was renamed as Family and Social Policies, which meant like the clear omittance of the word women from the name. And this was not just a symbolic gesture; it was also a very clear sign of the shift towards family-oriented policies in Turkey. This meant that there's going to be insufficient or limited resources allocated for women, while women are publicly treated as non-equal individuals, while they are confined within the family and solely seen as mothers. The social policies concerning women were reduced to charity rather than rights, and women were not provided any social support in case of violence, which forced them to stay in that violent atmosphere. What was again a horrifying turning point for us was this another time in May 2016, the Divorce Commission report, as it is known in the public. This report was written by a commission within the Turkish parliament, and it was criticized severely by independent women's and feminist organizations because it included implementation of conciliation in case of violence, and it valued the unity of the family over women's health, and it aimed to implement the criteria of consent in sexual acts with children and possible marriages in cases of abuse between the perpetrator and the victim, which we know that by implication serves the perpetrator from legal punishment. And after this 2016 Divorce Commission report, basically it has all gone downhill, we can say that. Because we don't have enough time, I'm just gonna mention like a couple important points here. Hate speech against LGBTI+ has increased during this time, and hate crime has been encouraged by the higher levels of the state. On Saturday, we were at the protest for March 8th, and I'm sure you already heard about this, but with the arrests of trans women, we really suffered kind of like resisted to the police to get our rainbow umbrellas in the protest area, for instance. Right to abortion is also a big issue since 2010 mainly. It is, even though it is legal up to 10 weeks, it is now practically prohibited. And independent women's organizations' decades-long struggle has been weakened by shutting them down and by criminalizing them by high-level officials, which may become more and more common now with this NGO law that is trying to shut down the civil society in Turkey. And the last point is, of course, as we all want to talk about today, discussions about the withdrawal from the Istanbul Convention. Even though Turkey has been the first country to sign this convention before EU countries, recently it has become the center of misogynistic attacks by men. And the misogyny contained in the discourses produced in these discussions serves the discrimination and violence faced by women. It penetrates the whole society, it penetrates the judicial system, the protection system, the police forces, for instance. And the anti-convention discourse is also aimed at combating violence against women in a holistic way. These attacks oppose the state to develop mechanisms and penalties to combat violence against women, and they attack women's right to have a life free from violence. Yet we also know that unfortunately this is not unique to Turkey. This is common in European countries as well. Just like our feminist solidarity, the misogynistic attacks also exceed beyond boundaries and now very common. For instance, in Bulgaria, in Poland, there are discussions about withdrawal. Bulgaria hasn't even ratified the convention. And today we want to highlight that it would be supportive for our cause here in Turkey if all the EU countries have had ratified it and prevent any attempts to withdraw from the Istanbul Convention. I know that we don't have much time, but I just want to briefly, if I have time, I want to briefly mention how this discussion about the Istanbul Convention affects women's lives, specifically in the case of violence against women.
you have 2 or 3 more minutes if you can.
Okay,
I'm
that's
sure
enough
we
for me.
will have questions on this topic later.
Okay, yeah, that's enough for me. I just want to just briefly mention that, as you know, we have this landmark decision with Nahide Opuz versus Turkey at the ECHR. And it was a significant turning point for us because it declared the state's responsibility in prevention of violence. And since then, Turkey has ratified the Istanbul Convention and put together the law number 6284, which maps out this great mechanism to fight against violence. But we as Morçatı know that from our experience from the ground, from women, we know that the system does not work as it should be working, as it is written on paper, basically. Women are not given any information about their rights. They are misinformed by the police forces. They are supposed to, they are forced to show evidence in case of violence. They are not admitted, in some cases, they are not admitted to shelter if they don't show any evidence. They are encouraged to reconcile with the perpetrator. And the specialized social services do not work as they should be working. They don't implement any holistic approach. We have now issues with the cautionary decisions and protective measures that are given for like short periods of time that force women to apply again and again and again to receive them. The court takes too much time. Any kind of a divorce case takes at least 2 years in Turkey, which put women which force women to continue to be exposed to violence, basically. And in the criminal courts, the impunity of the perpetrators is also an ongoing like a problem. And these are all issues that we have seen in the Opuz case. This is really unfortunate that now what Nahide Opuz experienced is still happening in Turkey.
Thank you, Elif. I think I'm hoping to have more questions from the audience so that you can dig deeper into the areas that you mentioned. And as a reminder to our audience, you can always jump in with your questions by writing your questions on the panel. I will be directing those questions to any of the panelists that you would mention, or all of them, to your liking. And also we are going to open the floor to questions after the initial remarks of all the panelists. So if you would like to raise your question yourself, you will have to wait until the end of the introductory remarks, but you can always start typing your questions now. Now I would like to return to Rümeysa Çamderili. And I'm happy to be with her on this panel because I haven't met her in person before, and I was really curious about her. I think she is doing an incredible job of raising the women of Muslim feminists, raising the voice of Muslim feminists in Turkey. This is not a description by me, this is a description by her. That's why I'm at the liberty of using the Muslim feminist concept. She's also a young, fierce woman. She comes from a different tradition than Elif. They are working on the same issues, but Havle is the Turkey's first feminist women organization, if I'm not mistaken. And Rümeysa is the chairwoman of that organization. She has graduated from the VAWG University, which I'm sure you followed, has been in the headlines in the last 2 months because of the government-appointed director who was not embraced by the university students. And that's why protests are still going on, but there was a harsh crackdown by the government last month, unfortunately. Rümeysa, I'm sure will give you a better understanding of her own organization, how she came to lead such an organization, and also the take of the Muslim feminists in Turkey about these abuses that are perpetrated by ordinary men, but also the political rhetoric, which is, in my view, poisoning the society from top to bottom. So Rümeysa, floor is yours, and I will be very happy to hear about your organization before you jump onto the other topics.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for this great introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's great. It's a really great pleasure to be here with these important speakers, and it was so nice to hear Elif's introduction. It was really covering everything mainly, so I have nothing to add on to the Turkish direct thing, so I can talk about my own issue only. I'm a Muslim feminist, and VAWG is the first Muslim feminist organization in Turkey. And this is actually something that's about filling in or having a contribution to the feminist movement in Turkey. That's the main aim, the main mission of our organization. So feminism has been an important movement that changed a lot in terms of society, in terms of laws, in terms of many fields in Turkey, which is not really widely known by the society, and is one of the layers that is really affecting this from our perspective is religion, actually. So there is a lack of religious women, Muslim women, as subjects in feminist movement in Turkey. There has been like that, and I think we are trying to fill that gap to empower and also strengthen the movement, the feminist movement for these days. And also Turkey has been really having an interesting transformation about the different subjects. Even now, it talked about the trans feminists. So different subjects of feminists to be visible in feminism this much, so that it can be more mainstream, more known, and more embraced by different groups of people from Turkey. So we are acting as a bridge between the feminist understanding and the so-called conservative part of this society to transfer the needs of each part, actually. So it's interesting topic to be talking about. VAWG was established in 2018. In the middle of 2018, but we've been acting in this field as activists, as volunteer activists beforehand as well. One of the first formations that we were writing in was Reçel Blog. It was a digital medium that actually brought us together. So our way of being organized, this was also something unique for the first time, because after the blog was there, and also there are some English writings that you can check there, we could see that our views through religion, our anti-patriarchal views and commentaries of Islam wasn't some marginal view, so that we saw that we're not alone, and we were some crowded group of people that wanted to discuss this, and many of them were young women. So after seeing this as a mobilization potential, we had this organization, VAWG, as the umbrella organization for the different activisms that we have done, like mosques, Women in Mosques campaign. So we are trying to find different ways of Muslim women and their unique experiences to be visible in the public space and the feminist movement itself. So hence we are trying to form some knowledge around this, and also there's actually a really lacking knowledge in terms of Islam and anti-patriarchal commentaries of Islam in the Turkish literate way, and also in many kinds of, for example, social media, you cannot find anything about this to learn more. So we are trying to provide this space to different women. And also we are trying to provide some knowledge for the feminist movement itself as well. So directly connected to this panel, I can say that we had a project about early marriages, the child marriages, and we conducted the research, and after the research, after the outputs of the research, we've done a field work with women from different backgrounds with religion, actually. So from the universities, from the religious high schools, or from different religious institutions, we brought together these women and talked about the issue of child marriages and how to fight against this issue through a religious perspective. So our research was interesting to say that first, it also happened this year. So Istanbul Convention discussion was something, even there maybe it's 2 weeks only in between the issues. So we had many to bother, although we had the pandemic all over our head, we had to bother with all these issues together. And the child marriages issue was something they said that the society wants this. The society thinks that children can marry, so we cannot make them force them to not to do that. So that was the statement of the authorities about the issue. So our research showed that it was not the case. So 91.8% of the society does not want their children to be married under 18. So that's the first and the most empowering data actually we got from the research. And in addition to the data we get like this, we also had some quantitative research where we seen that religion did not act as a motivator. People did not really make their children marry before 18 as they are religious. After they marry their children, because of different factors, where sexuality is one of the most important variants, after they marry their children, they use religion as a medium of legalization of their action, actually. So there is an open door that must be closed by different authorities, and these authorities, these religious authorities, and also us as activists need to say to society that this is not something that actually is not also approved by the religion as well. So that was our approach to the issue, and we will proceed about this perspective to different issues like violence as well. So in the pandemic process, we've experienced that, we've seen that Muslim women, actually Muslim young women with their fathers and mothers in their houses, had a really important psychological violence in their houses when they expressed their thoughts about the commentaries of Islam, for example, or there's a wide range of this, but I can give an example like this. So we want to find a space where these unique experiences can find a voice, and we started a research about this issue, how the layer of religion acts like it was the legalization medium in the early marriages. We're asking the question how it acts in the issue of violence. I hope that in the end of this year, we'll come up with an output to this research as well, and we'll provide the knowledge to both the feminists and both the other parts of the society as well. I can summarize my thoughts like this.
Rümeysa, thank you so much. I am sure you're going to get more questions on the work you have been doing, which is very, very important, especially the early marriages is one of the biggest problems in Turkey, as you mentioned. Now I would like to turn to Melis Alpan, a colleague of mine, a very dear friend of mine. I witnessed her journey, and she stick to these important questions early on during her career, and she was criticized for doing that by the elder male management teams of our former newspapers. And thank God now she's an independent journalist, and she both writes on the issues and she sheds light on the problems, but she also has become a subject to the harassment, online harassment, and also she was targeted because she's a woman journalist and because she's been trying to raise the problems of women. So there is like two aspects that she can, I believe, talk about in her remarks. One about how the Turkish media has been failing in terms of tackling with the violence against women and children, but also how female journalists in Turkey unfortunately become part of the problem. Melis, floor is yours. I think you're still on mute, Melis'cim, so why don't
Okay.
you?
Thank you, Cansu. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you on Women's Day. So increasingly large numbers of women in Turkey have suffered abuse or lost their lives through attacks by men. In 2020 alone, 300 women were killed by men. Violence against women is very common in Turkey, and the government is not introducing measures to counter the problem and protect the victims. We know that most of the femicides are a result of domestic violence. A police report found that 72% of femicides in Turkey took place in apartments or housing complexes. Despite the stark picture, the Council of Europe Treaty to Prevent and Combat Violence Against Women and Other Forms of Domestic Violence, also known as the Istanbul Convention, as my friends mentioned here, which is not implemented in practice, was open to discussion last summer on the grounds that the treaty is a tool of Western imperialist powers to undermine traditional family values and structures. We know that gender inequality lies at the root of violence against women, and unfortunately, Turkey ranked 130th out of 153 countries in the World Economic Forum's the Global Gender Gap Index 2020. Turkey ranked 136th in economic participation and opportunity, 136th in economic participation and opportunity, 106th in the wage gap, 64th in health and survival, and 109th in political empowerment. According to this, to the gender gap calculator, a woman in Turkey has to wait for 167 years for the world to close the gender gap completely. In Turkey, only 17.4% of parliamentary seats are held by women. 50% of adult women have reached at least a secondary level of education compared to 72% of their male counterparts. Female participation in the labor market is 34% compared to 72.6% for men. So once again, International Women's Day is overshadowed by inequality and violence. In such an environment, situation in media is not so different, but yet the way to tackle the problem of gender inequality is to transform society and the dominant mentality in society. In our patriarchal society, men have overwhelming advantages, whereas women are positioned passively. Society's perception seriously affects the way women participate in social life, their rate of participation, visibility, and status in society. The patriarchal order creates a culture of violence based on sexism. The media, on the other hand, plays an active role in the construction of sexist discourse as the most important element that designs how women are positioned in society's mentality. And unfortunately, violence against women is often legitimized and even fueled in the press. The media has a large share in the construction of this claim of reality, where men are presented as stronger and more active than women, and women as obedient, passive, dependent, powerless, and the spread of the sexist discourse in society that makes women seem weak. While the sexist discourse establishes and consolidates the social power of men, it places them in a superior and privileged position in every respect. And physical and sexual violence against women is the most common media coverage. This is a very narrow frame because there are other forms of violence against women like economic and psychological violence. In general, we can say that the media in Turkey does not act responsibly for the prevention of human rights violations and violence against women, and has even become a tool in which this inequality and violence is taught, supported, and reproduced at a mass level. The media produce and maintain gender role patterns that discriminate against women in Turkey. Today, compared to the past, although the number of female employees in the media has increased, women are still underrepresented, and the number of women in management positions is still low. The media, owned and run by men, is influencing the maintenance of sexism as a tool of power. According to the International Women's Media Foundation Global Report, nearly 2/3 of reporters are male, and this gender imbalance is even worse on top management level, where 73% of the positions are held by men and only 27% by women. The report identified a glass ceiling for women in 20 of 59 nations studied. Most commonly, these invisible barriers were found in middle and senior management levels. The report dates back to 2011, a long time, but from what we see, I don't think much has changed since. The media reinforces the gender-based roles of men and women and sexist prejudices against women. It encourages violence, makes it tabloid and eroticized. It ignores women, even on issues related to women, and does not seek women's opinions. For example, we often see that only male guests are invited to programs that talk about violence against women on news channels in Turkey. In other words, the media itself violates women's rights. However, the way to combat violence against women is primarily through not reproducing it. The media must stop reproducing violence. Women subjected to violence not being accused by the media is much more important than getting clicks with pornographic details. The headlines and the elements used in the news not only deepen the discrimination against women, but also convey the message that women deserve violence and even being killed. Media is obliged to put an end to their efforts to legitimize the violence against women and to investigate the facts. As if it's not enough to combat discrimination in all areas of life, especially female journalists throughout the globe are also exposed to violence, harassment, and threats of murder, rape, and physical violence on social media via email, etc. Free and safe internet is essential for public debate and free flow of information, and therefore should be protected. But is it safe for female journalists? We know from IFJ survey that online harassment affects both male and female journalists. However, the severity is much more extreme for female journalists. Results from the survey found that online abuse has a massive impact on female journalists. It affects almost 2/3 of them, causing psychological trauma and leading to self-censorship, as well as women declining assignments or leaving the industry altogether. Sexual harassment in the media industry has long been a problem, but today online attacks aimed at women reporters are growing. Media can never be free if the women are silenced. Journalist safety is a precondition for free speech and free media. Experiencing gender-related threats and abuse on the internet has a direct impact on female journalists' safety and future online activities. I've been subjected to online abuse many times due to a piece I wrote or something I posted on social media. Online harassment directed towards me was mainly based on my gender, such as sexist insults and rape threats, among other gender-based attacks. But online abuse against male journalists is not mainly based on gender. In 2017, I wrote an article about domestic abuse in Turkey, and I quoted the head of Turkish Women Association Federation as saying that the incest level in Turkish families was very high. This article I wrote evoked a fierce controversy around the taboo for Turkish society, to the extent that I almost faced court for insulting the Turkish nation. A huge attack on me started on social media. It went on for days, even weeks. I got all kinds of threats and was subjected to a lot of hate speech. When a journalist expresses an opinion that is against the opinion of the general public, she is directly targeted. Last summer, I tweeted criticizing the practice of banning beaches for Syrians. Upon this tweet, someone scrolled down on my Instagram feed and found a photo from a daily boat trip and put it into circulation, creating the perception that I was a distant journalist from the public who did not get off the boat to the beaches and therefore not disturbed by the Syrians. The person who created the false perception by sharing this photo on Twitter received a serious interaction. My share was a tweet saying, "I hope Syrians rape you." I think this sums it all up. So this violence against women, we know from the real world, moved into the cyberspace now. A lot of women live in fear because of that. I have had my share of online abuse. There's a relatively new example. Last April, when COVID just started, I have tweeted that there was no harm not going on holiday for a year. Then came summer and COVID restrictions were kind of lifted off. I went on an isolated holiday. Then 2 months later, when restrictions were again tightened, someone went through my social media feeds and found a picture where I was alone on the seaside and shared it as it was very recent, that I was finger wagging to the public about going on holiday and then doing it myself, and that I was a hypocrite. Then a storm of abuse started on social media. There's one thread in particular that I cannot forget. I got a message from a man, I don't know, saying that he'll rip my mouth with a 50-centimeter long Rambo knife. First thing I did was to search on Google to see what a Rambo knife looked like. With all these attacks, I guess I coped with fear by convincing myself that the attacks would stay online and never be carried offline, but yet they can. I guess I could never comprehend, I still can't, that someone can actually physically attack me or even kill me because of something I wrote or I said. So what female journalists need before all else is strong support systems, including psychological and legal assistance. States should strengthen their capacity of law enforcement, apply existing laws that are in line with international human rights standards, but definitely hold back from introducing new criminal laws that could limit freedom of expression. Social media companies should allocate more resources towards social science solutions, whereas today they devote more resources to computer science solutions. Computer science cannot handle human behavior. So these platforms need effective reporting processes. They need to be transparent. Basically, they need to take responsibility for the things that happen on their platform. We still live in a man's world, but what's different today is that feminist movement is rising again. Younger generation, especially younger women, are much more sensitive to sexism. Even teens are protesting against the objectification of women. Feminism is on the rise again. The world is definitely changing. I believe in favor and because of women. Maybe that's why the attacks against women escalate and are so ruthless. And this is exactly why we should all fight against abuse online or offline. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melis. Unfortunately, these are things that do not make us smile on a Women's Day. All the threats that you mentioned, and you're not the only one. There are so many colleagues of ours, but also ordinary women who cannot speak on their behalf, but we are here to speak on their behalf. And by the way, the questions started pouring, but I'll come back to questions after our final panelists take the floor. And now it's time for Olga Gonzalez. She is from the European Commission, and apparently I wasn't aware that the EU Commission has a Director General for Gender Equality, and you're the Gender Equality Coordinator. And since when does the European Commission have this branch? Maybe you can start by giving a little bit of history on that and why the EU Commission felt the need to give extra focus on gender equality, but also all of the other panelists talked about the situation of, how grim the gender equality problem in Turkey is, and what is the take of the European Commission in terms of the statements coming from the president and his members of his government who actively state that there is no gender, there is no such thing as gender equality. They don't believe in the equality of women. So what is the position of the European Commission on this problem? Olga, floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I mean, and as the previous panelists, the main challenges has been already raised. I mean, regarding, gender equality issues. I would like to present, the gender equality, the Gender Action Plan, the third one, that is for the EU Commission, but also for the member states that they are working in our partner countries, because this is our strategic framework when we are talking about gender equality issues. As you said, what is the take on? In addition, for the candidate and potential candidate countries, we monitor as well all the gender equality progress in the annual reports. In the large main packets, in each country, they have to report. So it's specifically under the areas of the political criteria, Chapter 19 that deals with the social and employment, issues of gender-based violence, they are raised. The main highlights obviously is not very extensive because the reports, they have to deal with all the chapters, but we try to just to incorporate which are the main highlights, the main challenges regarding gender equality across the reports. So this is very important. And also, for example, we just have in the last month, we have meetings with civil society organizations. Before that, we have the subcommittee with the government in order to discuss, which are the developments on gender equalities. So the same issues that has been brought here, they had been raised, previously, with civil society and also to the government, issues of the progress, the implementation of the Istanbul Convention regarding, for example, the shelters that they are in the countries, the helplines, if they are available, and also taking into consideration, the post-COVID, that has shown that gender-based violence, it has increased in many, many countries. Although that, for example, in Turkey, the issue of data, the lack of accurate data is really problematic. So I will present you briefly, the Gender Action Plan 3, that it was approved in last November, last year. So it's the strategic document that guides all of external actions regarding gender equality. It has been aligned with the EU priorities and strategies and policies that they are in place. For example, the EU, there is a gender equality strategy that it was approved in 2010. The Women, Peace and Security Action Plan, it has been as well integrated. This action plan, it has been broadly consulted, with different stakeholders, with the member states, with UN agencies, with civil society organizations, and it has been built as well by a previous gender evaluation of all the programs and the previous gender action plan that we have in the field. So this document is composed, there is a communication and it's accompanied by a staff working document that it has two main parts. One is related to the let's say the most institutional part is an internal part that it's so deals with which is going to be our approach on how we are going to work on gender equality, who is going to do what, how is going to be the implementation, the need to continue doing gender mainstreaming, the targets that we had set, capacity building, etc. And the second part of the document is related to the thematics and the indicators. And one of the thematics, and this is the main pillar, is gender-based violence, as is what in the previous gap. So in Gender Action Plan. So this Gender Action Plan, it has 5 pillars. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the engagement for gender equality and women's empowerment. So we have the target that at least 85% of the new actions that they are defined in each country will be targeting gender equality if it is done using a mainstreaming approach or a targeted approach, that it's an action that deals specifically with gender equality. So that will be the main target. We used to have, that target in the previous gap, but we have not reached. We are like around 60%. So we need to continue progressing, making sure that all the actions deals with gender equality. I mean, that they are mainstream, and we keep the focus as well in some of the key issues, like, for example, in issues of gender-based balance. No, so we need to have a gender transformative approach, really, to see, I mean, the gender power relations. No, as you mentioned, that is the main problematic, for example, in Turkey. We need to adopt also rights-based approach. Intersectionality is it's also very important, because gender cut across race, age, religion, disability, etc. So we will continue, I mean, at political dialogue. I mean, as I mentioned, for example, we just have the subcommittee with Turkey. I mean, gender equality is included. I mean, we asked the government for the developments on issues of gender equality, and with particular, it was on issues on gender-based violence, and also under the COVID-19 pandemic. So, for example, the gender analysis, because you need, I mean, data in order to inform the policies. That we know that policies in Turkey, they are quite gender blind. You need to have a good understanding of which is the situation of gender equality in the country. The delegation has already gender analysis in place that it was done in 2018, but they are going to update it in order to have more, I mean, an accurate, I mean, analysis of which are the gaps and how to do it, which are going to be the priorities in the countries. And then, I mean, all the actions that they will not target gender equality, they will have to provide a robust justification. So why this action is not really targeting gender equality. So the second pillar is the engagement that we are going to have at country level and at regional level. And here, one of the new elements that we have under this new gender action plan is the development of country level implementation plans that needs to be done with the member states that they are working in the country, but also in coordination and consultation with the national authorities and civil society organizations, in particular women's organizations that they are working in the field, in order to identify which are going to be the main areas of work for the next 5 years and the objectives that they are going to be reached. So this is really, I mean, this is really important. And we just had a meeting, I mean, last month with the member states in the country to present, I mean, the strategy and this document that needs to be done, I mean, by the summer in July. So the third pillar is the 6 thematic areas of engagement that are the following. The first one is deals with gender-based violence. The second one deals with the promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights. The third one is focused on the strengthening the economic, social rights and empowering, I mean, girls and women. The fourth one is related to the advancing equal participation and leadership. The fifth one is related to women, peace and security. So it is the integration of the agenda into this gender action plan. And the sixth area of engagement is the green transition and digitalization, that they were raised. I mean, they were included in the latest EU gender strategy, in the strategy for the EU. So, and then, I mean, regarding the internal pillar, just to briefly mention, for example, that we will provide, I mean, more training, more capacity building to all the staff at the EU level, no, in order to be able to implement also, I mean, the programs. It's going to be mandatory, for example, the trainings, I mean, for the management, included the head of the delegations, they will receive a training on gender equality, and gender parity will be also foreseen. And we are going to do an annual reporting, I mean, all on the internal aspect and on the thematics. For example, we will have to report in 2023. We will report, so what are we doing in these systematic areas? And we will do as well a final evaluation, I mean, in 2025. Regarding, so now, all the delegations, they are, as I mentioned, they are preparing this country level implementation plan. They have to define which are going to be the priorities. No, for example, in Turkey, I mean, gender equality, as I mentioned, is central for the EU accession processes, and because it's a mandatory requirement, political requirement that needs to be fulfilled. So we are funding, for example, we have programs that they are dedicated to the combat of violence against women, the development of capacity of service providers, also, I mean, supporting main survivors of domestic violence. I mean, the promotion of measures to prevent crimes, to protect. I mean, women, to prosecute also the perpetrators. No, and also there are programs that funded to women's civil organizations to promote, I mean, gender equality agenda in the country. Regarding the Istanbul Convention specifically, we have 3 programs running now. One is through the civil society facility that is regarding the dissemination of the CEDAW and the Istanbul Convention. Another one is with the Council of Europe, I mean, that is fostering on a comprehensive institutional response to violence against women and domestic violence in the country. And then we have a regional program that is implemented by UN Women that is in Western Balkans and Turkey. And in Turkey specifically, for example, they had worked with 13 organizations that at the same time they have supported, I mean, 60 grassroots organizations to advocate for the development and implementation of laws and policies that they are aligned with all the international commitments, in particular with the Istanbul Convention. So here, for example, at regional level, yep.
Javier is waiting, and also
sorry. Okay, I can
summarize yours, and then I'm sure we'll come back with questions.
Okay, good.
If you would like to say like a final word. Or...
No, I can present a little bit later what are we doing, I mean, with these programs. I mean, if there are questions in this regard. Thank you.
Okay, and I hope, as Nacho mentioned, this stays, the Istanbul Convention stays as one of the red lines for the European Union in terms of Turkey. I hope to take your words as a promise. But now, as a final panelist, I would like to introduce you Javier Martinez. He's a colleague of mine at the IPI, International Press Institute. And by the way, I forgot to mention that I'm a proud member of IPI's National Committee in Turkey. We work together with Javier, and he's our head of digital communications here at IPI. And he also works and focuses on online harassment against female journalists, just like Melis explained the threats and everything. And maybe before we jump onto the questions, Javier, you would like to give us an overview of these online harassment globally, what it means for female journalists and also transgender journalists, obviously.
Thank you very much, Jansu. Well, I think that Melis has already presented an overview, a very accurate, overview picture, right? But one of the things that IPI has focused is one, understanding the attacks and the patterns of the attacks. And on the other hand, what sort of solutions, measures can be used, to tackle online harassment, especially against women journalists as well, right? And recently we have analyze what sort of measures newsrooms should put in place, because they're often the first line of defense, right? So building on what Melis actually presented, that she actually did it pretty well, because she talked first, and I took some notes here, so that's why I'm looking down. She talked first about the scope of the issue, how many journalists have been affected based on surveys. She also talked on the consequences, like the emotional and professional toll that it takes on women journalists as well, and also the lack of commitment by newsrooms to tackle this issue, right? So first, in order to understand what sort of measures newsrooms, but also journalists need to implement to cope with this phenomenon, we also need to understand the type of attacks and how organized attacks against journalists takes place. So we need to, and we did a research back in 2016, but it was like sort of a historical research on how organized attacks presented throughout from 2013 all the way to end of 2016, amidst also the also in part of the research included the failed coup d'etat as well. That was a very interesting, from a journalistic perspective, of course, way to understand the phenomenon. We need to understand the phenomenon as a sort of a concentric rings. So first there is a very influential political figure who launches a tweet. Then there's a second concentric ring with a series of 3, 4 to 10 also influential figures on Twitter, which retweet their Twitter account or use the same hashtag. And why it's important, the hashtag, because they actually are serve as a label, as a tag towards the journalist. And that label, that tag, will actually accompany the journalist throughout her whole professional career. Meaning that every time that she writes about a topic, it doesn't matter if it has something to do related to the original topic that she was targeted with, then she will be also attacked using the same hashtag, such as is the case, for example, of Selin Girit in Turkey, right? Back in 2013, when she was attacked as Selin Girit, you're a British spy. Since then, every time or every now and then that she writes something about, anything else, she is targeted with that label. And then the third, and last, concentric ring happening all this on Twitter, on social media, is how organically, the rest of followers of these influential figures pick up on these smearing and discrediting and vicious attacks against women journalists. And finally, there is a stamp of verification that, okay, so we have these pro-government, figures, pro-government media organizations and so on, that suddenly says, okay, so basically they publish articles reporting on what's happening on social media, and therefore by reporting on that, they basically put the stamp of these attacks are credible. Meaning, if everyone says on Twitter that Melis Alpan is X, therefore there must be something true about it. So by giving credibility to these rumors and smear campaigns. But then here it goes, the fact of what measures, what newsrooms should put in place. And the first and most important part is by creating a conducive environment for journalists to report. Because one of the things that we have observed in visiting over 40 newsrooms across Europe, but also throughout years of in-depth reporting and interviews with journalists, is the fact that they don't want to come forward and report because they feel stigmatized. They feel like they are lesser of a journalist. And then if you, on top of that, you include that you're a woman, and on top of that, you include that you're a woman, a transgender woman, or like a woman of color, then it actually adds an extra layers of stigmatization. And if it's already difficult for a woman to reach, to a certain level when she feels comfortable writing about any topics, they don't actually want to lose that part, right? So this is a very important part. So create a conducive environment, create reporting lines. Editors and managers should talk about, online harassment very informally, even in editorial meetings. Just try to normalize that attacks against journalists, specifically the vicious attacks that women journalists are targeted with. This is something that the newsroom is taking seriously. And then there's a whole process of the risk assessment that should be of the attack that should be conducted together with the journalist. And then all the support mechanisms based on that risk assessment of the situation, etc. But this is one of the things that overall, we've found that there is a lack of, I wouldn't say of commitment in many newsrooms that we have investigated, that we have visited across Europe. but there is certainly a lack of understanding of what we should do, right? There is a certain level of awareness among the newsrooms, in the newsrooms, but there's definitely this lack of, okay, so let's do this. And then finally, throughout the several in-depth interviews that we conducted with women journalists, and Melis Alpan, she was one of them as well, when we filmed a documentary about it. It was basically that at the end of the day, when they see and they face this lack of institutional support, or even this lack of structure mechanisms in the newsrooms, they try to cope with online harassment on their own way. And the different techniques that they have proven to be successful to cope with that from a personal level would be like, first, the naming and shaming, meaning, putting on Twitter or on Facebook, whatever, taking a screenshot of the attacks and saying, look, this is what's happening to me. And basically naming and shaming the trolls and the tweets that are targeting them. Then there is a second also layer, which is very important, which is these support networks. Basically how friends and colleagues of the journalists should also, in very serious cases, should actually monitor the attacks, the social media accounts of the journalists that have been targeted, to actually monitor and understand if there is a credible threat against them, and therefore take the following steps. These steps can be like reporting to the authorities, but in the case of Turkey, that it's very difficult because in some cases, even the authorities are behind these attacks, right? Or, evidentially, I mean, it's very difficult to find these evidences, but, all circumstances indicate that, authorities in some cases might be behind these attacks. And then last but not least, which is finding this emotional support. I know that it feels like very random and very informal, but just sitting down to grab a coffee and talk about it, it's really important, because throughout these months, and with this I'm finishing, we've been doing these sort of workshops in newsrooms and also focus groups with women journalists. And for most of them, it was the first time that they were talking publicly or with another colleagues about their experiences. So there's not the habit of talking about it, right? So just grabbing a coffee and talking about their experience and the whole process that they've endured or they are enduring, it has already a positive impact on their mental health.
Arya, thank you so much. As you mentioned, in the case of Turkey, unfortunately, these attacks on most of the female journalists are coordinated somehow by extensions of the Turkish government, and especially the trolls, as we say, on social media are directly coordinated by the communications directorate most of the times. And there's of course evidence that we can talk about, but now is the time for questions from the audience. And we have so many questions. And most of the questions are for all the panelists, but I will try to pick questions for certain panelists, because otherwise we won't be finishing the panel at the time which was scheduled. So the first question is from Gamze Rezan Sarıshen. And she is asking how you perceive and assess the measures introduced by the Turkish government at the new action plan on human rights, the so-called, I would say, human rights action plan, and especially in relation to the fight against violence against women and domestic violence. And for this question, I would like to invite Nacho Sanchez Amor for his take. And also after Nacho, maybe Elif can jump in with her own contribution.
Thank you, Tansu. I'm not as familiar as I would need to do to express myself in a quite complicated issue, but I'm reluctant simply to admit that the put on a paper, you are doing things, means the thing has been done. This is my problem. because I heard about the judicial reform in Turkey for the last, I don't know, 8 years. I continue seeing what happened with the rolling court. I continue what's happening with the court of the European Court of Human Rights, and for that reason, not knowing deeply what is written in the new action plan, I do really know from you what is your assessment of that. My approach is still the same. This is not about to draft enormous and ambitious plans. This is about to order the prosecutors how they have to deal with the cases and to, I can say, influence the judges. But at least let know the judges, they are free to apply the law in the most professional and objective way. This is the only thing I can say in that moment, because I don't know really deeply the content of the human rights action plan in this part. But let me add what do we know from our experience in Europe? You have to balance. You have to create a mix, having legal reforms. In my view, having legal reforms a couple of steps ahead of the median standard of society, and then an enormous effort in educating the public opinion. It was happening in Spain with the gay marriage. What happened in Spain with the adoption for gay couples, that kind of thing. You always have to push the law a little bit ahead of the society. If not, you are simply replying the conservative views of the society. And for that reason, you have to mix legal reforms and enormous effort and didactic reform about the normality of that kind of things. It was happening in Spain with most of the social advances we had in our relatively young democratic history, and this is the way to act. But please, because I noticed some of my dear friends from the NGOs in Turkey, they are so deeply involved trying to draft or to contribute to the draft of norms that finally we are forgetting this is about the political will. This is not about the drafting of papers. This is about the political will, and we have to assess the sincerity of the political will, and the only way to do that is examining the facts, not the program, not the plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I may just add to it, I can say that we don't, of course, dismiss it altogether. It is still important that this statement, this new action plan is made and it is stated, and there are even like minor points in it about, for instance, about stalking, that is kind of new, and that is a little bit a step towards forward. But it is really important that we see the action here. Of course, as we all know, as women in Turkey, as feminist organizations in Turkey, the state makes these kind of announcements, make these kind of plans. There was a circular in December 2019, for instance, about the implementations. It is really important that we see the implementation of this action plan on practice, rather than just like something that is happening on paper and presented to the public We want to see this in practice. But I also, briefly, I want to mention that what Nacho Sanchez Amor just said, adding to that, it is really important that the European authorities also follow up on these kind of action plans in their monitoring processes. Recently, a lot of people here already underlined this, but recently we have been witnessing this Turkish state's unqualified reports, unqualified contributions to the monitoring processes in different levels of the European, in different European institutions. But it is really important that these kind of action plans are followed up, just like we will do it We expect them to do follow-up on them and to ask concrete questions. Mr. Nacho Sanchez Amor just said, like, send me facts in the very beginning. And it's really important that Turkish government is asked about the facts, about the implementation of these kind of action plans.
Thank you, Elif. Now we have several questions from Mina Murat Baldwin. And she also said the questions are for all panelists, but I'm still gonna use my discretion to pick one question for each panelist. And it starts with Rümeysa. Mina says, as Rümeysa Çamdereli acknowledged, there is a lack of understanding and knowledge within the Turkish society of what feminism or patriarchy is and what it means in practice. Do you think we should perhaps mention the etiquettes and labels such as feminism and patriarchy less so that women in need feel comfortable reaching out for our support? Rümeysa.
This is a question that we actually discussed with each other when we are forming the organization itself. Because beforehand we didn't, we individually called ourselves feminists, but we didn't call our organizations or our platforms feminists beforehand. But it actually decreased our strength of solidarity and working together through more observation, and all the people from organization would actually, I think, be in the same page with me. Because when we call ourselves feminists, we have a common ground with each other when organizing in terms of discrimination against women, violence, etc. So about the conceptual level. So feminism gives many tools to women to have an important medium to organize together. So that's hence we decided to have our organization. Maybe we could be less in number, but we could be more in quality, we thought, in terms of contributing to feminist movement, and it was the case. And even then, actually, we didn't expect so much of volunteers or participants to our events, where more than 100 volunteers we have from different parts of Turkey. For a young organization, this is a really large number, I guess. And also in the space of civil society shrinking in each day. And in addition, all our organizations events are really full of different people. So I think that this is not something that we actually get step back from saying. When people see that there are many different women calling themselves feminists, will make it, not saying less, but also saying more, and more people saying that could disseminate the idea better.
Right. Thank you, Rümeysa. There's a very important question. The second question of Mina, apparently. How do the panelists plan to reach out to women from diverse backgrounds? And she gave the example of uneducated and low-income women coming from low-income backgrounds. I would like to give this question a little twist and turn to Melis. Because she was operating in the mainstream media landscape, and now she's an independent journalist writing for several publications, and she's an outspoken activist as well, raising her voice on different mediums. But first and foremost, she is seen as a secular woman in Turkey. So my question to Melis is, while you had the experience of this online harassment, did you get support from the Muslim woman, the pious woman in Turkey? Was there any kind of discrimination against you coming from women? That might be one question. And the second question, which is more related to what Mina was trying to ask, is that as a journalist, of course, your work, your writings reach to educated segments of the society inevitably more. So if you are trying to reach out to uneducated women, what is their response to you as a journalist when you try to talk about these problems with them? I'm talking about women who are not familiar with your work, because some of them cannot even read.
Well, I think I cannot reach them, first of all, because that's why actually I miss mainstream media. What we consider mainstream media right now is pro-government media. So we have no mainstream media. Of course, women who cannot read would still not be informed if I was still writing for Hürriyet, let's say, for a mainstream newspaper. But still, I think I was able to reach out to more people in all the segments. So I think that was a good way, to reach out to more women. But now, because I'm not working for the mainstream media, because there's no mainstream media, I don't think I can reach those women. But if I was a TV presenter, let's say, or a TV journalist, I think I would be reaching to a lot of uneducated women. So I am not that person, so I still cannot reach. Well, I'm not an activist, actually. Well, in the latter years, we all became activists, but originally, I'm not an activist. I'm a journalist, so I don't go out to towns and talk to women and stuff like that. I go there when I have to write a piece or something like that. So I usually write their stories. Maybe I don't reach them, but whenever they reach me, I wrote their stories. There were a lot of uneducated women in those stories. There were a lot of religious women in those stories. That's why I'm against the saying that violence against women, men who are violent against women are not leftist. Some leftists say they're rightist, rightists say they're leftist, stuff like that. But it's all men from all the groups. So I think, yeah, I cannot reach them actually. But what was the second question? What was the first one you said? From women, did I get reactions when I was being attacked? Yes, there were some women. This group that are called TERFs, which are transphobic radical feminists, we can translate it like that. They really attacked me because they were angry about me because I'm supportive of a different feminism than them. I think it should be more inclusive. So they were the ones who really attacked me because they're angry about something else, basically, which is not a very righteous act, I think. Yeah.
Elif, yes, I was going to give the floor to you anyways. So I have a little question to you, along the lines of Mina's question. Mor Çatı is a shelter organization. So it's kind of like a wider organization in terms of representation, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you can give us some examples and maybe some figures as well in terms of how inclusive Mor Çatı is, and are you able to appeal to different segments of the society in your view?
Yeah, that's why I also wanted to talk a little bit about this, because Mor Çatı is a great example in that sense. We don't conduct any kind of neighborhood work, or we don't have any branches in small neighborhoods, in small towns, but from all around Turkey, from rural areas to urban areas, cities, towns, villages, low-class women, upper-class women, educated women, uneducated women, they all reach us. And this is actually a great example that shows that this supposed tension around the word feminism, that actually doesn't exist like that in practice. Mor Çatı was founded by feminists 30 years ago and has been emphasizing that it's a feminist organization for a long time now. We have never abstained from saying that. still women call us and reach us out. Sometimes they do this because we are feminists, for instance, or sometimes they do this despite the fact that we are feminists. We love this example that one woman who reached us told us that, like, she called us even though she knew that we were feminists, and she was kind of cautious about this fact. But it is not like the social work that we conduct is actually going beyond the term feminism. Like, when you apply the feminist method in the social work, what we mean by this is that when you remind women about their power, their own strength as part of the fight against violence against women, it is kind of it becomes inclusive for every woman. Like, on the one hand, the violence is actually common in every segment of the society, right? Like, we have women, wives of professors, university professors, calling to Morçatı to receive support from us, which means that those men are not exempt from this patriarchal this violence against women. But also we have this, like, women from all other segments who want to who reach us, who seek for support, and are I'm gonna say touched by this feminist solidarity that we built with them. And it is really, really important that we don't kind of like reproduce this, maybe I can even use the word prejudice, because we receive all these emails from very, like, uneducated women who understand the power of like feminism to women's solidarity. And even today, one woman, she's from a low income family, and she's not a very educated woman. She emailed us to tell us that, like, she celebrates our March 8th. She's very happy to meet us. And I'm not just talking about this to brag about this, but I'm talking about this, like, how this feminist method can work without any like stigma around the term.
Right. Rumeysa, are you on the same page with Elif in the sense that you get positive reactions from all different parts of the feminist movement in Turkey? Or when you first founded your organization, was there some kind of suspicion or question marks around why you were coming up with a different label?
Of course, there was some tension beforehand, but and also we don't have a history of only the association, but also beforehand we had a direct activist career within the feminist movement, so that there were, of course, some tensions. Of course, there was huge discussions. Of course, we felt discrimination sometimes in some meetings, but we didn't actually think that it was feminist at all. So that we had these gestures to be limited to the person as an individual gesture, and we fought against it. So resistance is everywhere. Resistance is even inside us. So that, but in the end, after the association is formed, actually we are really accepted, because we were also not organized enough to answer the questions of different parts of the feminist movement and different parts of the society itself. So as we formed the association, the acceptance got higher, and also we got a better place actually in different forms of organizing together, like this today's demonstration. Like we have a friend there representing us. In another platform, we have a friend there representing us. So this is something powerful. Hence, people see us there. When they see us there, they get used to, there's some slogan in the 8th of March as well, we use so much, you'll get used to us. So they got used to us. So it is something, I think, important and strong for all the different identities, all the different feminist subjects to be visible. So I think it's a nice change in our sense, and we feel really embraced these days.
I think for the, especially for our FODIAN audience participants who are here with us today, it will be interesting to highlight the specifics of those tensions when you first entered the scene, because it's very unique to Turkey, I imagine, but also it might have some global, trends as well. So why was there reaction from other parts of the feminist movement in Turkey when they saw you organizing, Rümeysa? Could you give us some little, some examples of this?
Yes, of
action?
course. Yeah, in first, not all of us are hijabi, so we don't all the people in our organization do not cover their hair. But the first thing that was really interestingly polarization thing was hijab and headscarf, because there has been a huge time of even like a decade of banning hijab in universities, and it was an important symbol for the polarization in Turkey. So being anti or pro hijab, pro headscarf was something that was really replacing people and positioning people in a specific polarization. And through this polarization, hijab was discussed as a symbol of limiting freedom of women. And I think this is a global discussion. Yes, there's a huge discussion around it. And now hijabi women all over the world are trying to say that this is my choice. Not all the hijabi women is choosing this. Of course, there are some women being forced to cover their hair, like in countries like Iran. This is something that is really negative and that must be resisted against. But I am doing this through my will, so that we have to see this as a freedom, and so that we can resist together. This was the main statements that hijabi women using in their actually movement. So in our case as well, first thing was about our hijab, and second thing was about the religion itself. Although we also had some Islamophobic comments, which was only marginal part of the story. Many women had many questions about the interpretation, the mainstream interpretations of Islam that is really limiting and that's really discriminative against women. And we also talked about our approach to the religion, approach to Islam, and our commentaries, and not only our commentaries, but different sisters' commentaries from different parts of the world, like Malaysia, Indonesia, America, Europe's different parts, talking about the religion itself, and having so many anti-patriarchal commentaries of Islam that's disseminated. We are trying to disseminate this part so that we're answering their questions as well, because although we're calling ourselves Muslim, all the people in Turkey are somehow interacting with Islam and different commentaries of Islam, so that we have the responsibility, we feel the responsibility to answer different questions of people, like Islam itself is itself is patriarchal. So we have an answer to that question, so that through that answering, we are getting more and more solidarity together, actually. So that's how we approach to the issue. We were getting offended first times, but now I think this is a new medium and new sphere of discussing about religion, and we don't have any red limits, like we don't discuss this, etc. So we are open to any discussion. This also, I think, makes it easier to resist together.
Thank you, Rümeysa. Another question is this: how do the research findings Rümeysa Çamdereli presented will translate into practice, and what actions will be taken in that regard? I believe the question is along the lines of these opinion poll, which said that 91% of the Turkish society is against early marriages. Well, apparently there is no one here from the Turkish government or Turkish bureaucracy, so I believe our panelists will not be the right ones to talk about what actions should be taken. But maybe talking about the early marriages, anyone can jump in and talk about the civil society's suggestions in order to push the government towards taking stronger action. Anyone?
I may start with the first steps, like we are providing our knowledge to İçerik, the author platform that's really directly working about the Istanbul Convention and this kind of different laws that are trying to be embedded. So that's, I think, our how we do this. So after that, we go to the decision-making processes. And also about the issue of child marriages, I guess it was a step that was trying to getting decreased in this sense, because we have the 18 as the number of marriage, the age of marriage, which is really important for our region as well, which is a really unique case, and it's important. And that was trying to backlash. That was a trial of backlash. And we try to stop that. So we will try to stop that as well. So we have the positive side of the story in our hand that we can improve, but now they're trying to make it less. So that's the first step that can be taken to stop that. After that, we can talk about the dissemination part, I guess.
I want to say something. I did a book about last year. It was about girls from all over Turkey, like from 11 cities, 21 girls, and I told their stories. And because of this book, to write this book, I traveled a lot to the villages, on the east and on the south, north. And what I saw was that, what states should do. These girls, they get married very early, or their families marry them, whatever, because this looks like their only chance in life, to get married. But then the girls, which I wrote the stories of, they were different because they come from similar families, but they do something else. They do a sport, they play an instrument, whatever. And their families, even though they're from, let's say, uneducated, their families support them. So for the girls not to get married, what states should do, or what others, I don't know, but to show them that, and to show their families that there's another way, that's not the only way. Because girls initially don't want this, if they see that they can do something else with their lives, they don't want to get married. So I think that's very important to give them hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Melis. We have someone raising his hand. It's dear Andre de Munter, and I would like to give the floor to him for his question or his remarks. Andre?
Thank you very much, Can. So nice to see you again, even if it is on screen, and since our days in Brussels seem so long ago. Thank you so much. I first wanted to, further on what our rapporteur Nacho said on facts needed and deeds needed, and I know how frustrated he is, and also on panels when saying, please, I'm anxiously waiting for some positive signal ever since I became rapporteur for the European Parliament. It is true, I have been following developments, as you also know, Cansu, for a couple of decades already. And we have been there so often. We have had nice 9 May statements, even from Erdogan. In my cupboard, I have the glossy, our rapporteur referred to it as well, the glossy papers on the judicial reform, etc., at the time when Volkan Bozkır was still EU Affairs Ministry. And let's not forget that the EU Affairs Ministry has been downgraded to an EU directorate. So I would say, the first positive action could be to upgrade the EU Affairs Directorate to a full-fledged ministry. Again, we have had these reform action group meetings. Nothing happened between 2015 and 18. Then in less than a year, we had 3 meetings, lengthy, very promising statements and press releases. And since May, 2019, nothing happened, which is almost 2 years. So on top of that, we had not only on women, on LGBTI, we had the statements of President Erdogan, and a very recent one also, I think it was during the weekend, from Fahrettin Altun, the communications director, which is an all-right attack on these people. So all this in the context of, and let's use the word, so-called positive action. So we are waiting for this. I mean, if I may make a remark on the Istanbul Convention, let's be prudent there. We have 6 EU member states that have not yet ratified it. I mean, not having ratified it and wanting to step out of it is, of course, something completely different. We have an ongoing EU accession process to that Istanbul Convention, because I mean we are right in criticizing Turkey on that and on insisting, but we also know how Turkish authorities will immediately react, like along the lines, look at yourselves. I mean, when it comes to questions, I have one very general one. I mean, thank you very much for all these courageous women and their testimonies and all their good work. And would it be possible, either in a follow-up email or in the chat, to put a couple of links to, I mean, Rumeysa referred to the blog, Melis to the 2011 report, Javier mentioned the documentary. I would be, unless these can be very easily found on the website. One final question, and this is probably the odd or unexpected question in this context, and it's not me asking because I am a man, but as of tomorrow, there will be a 4-part series on Flemish television on domestic violence, which will be very inclusive, and the figures were staggering. I mean, we know that domestic violence is everywhere. In Belgium, it seems to be at least 1 out of 5 women, but also 1 out of 7 men, which is a staggering figure and which is really causing huge waves now in public opinion, and it is still extremely taboo. My question on that would be whether you are aware of any initiative like your valuable ones on violence against women to do something about it. What the situation could look like in Turkey, and whether there is any initiative to deal with that maybe underexposed group of people as well. That would be my question, and thank you so much for this very interesting panel and for all your good work. I mean, I get worked up when I get a cross comment when posting something on social media. I cannot remotely imagine what it would be like to be on the receiving end of sexist remarks and attacks like Melis. I mean, I'm really, it disturbs me hugely. Thank you so much.
Andre, thank you so much for your contribution. It's lovely to hear your voice, and I'm glad you still haven't given up on dealing with Turkey. I'm so glad. Maybe Elif might pick your question about the
yeah, but have I understood him correctly? Are you asking about any kind of initiative about domestic violence against men? Did I understand him correctly?
Yes, I'm not aware of it, and it is very little in the picture, and the fact that this will be actively dealt with in this television series triggered my curiosity, not as a man, but I mean as someone who is after the full picture. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And it is kind of, I don't know what Rumeysa or Melis thinks, but it is kind of very unusual question for us, I believe, because we are as a political approach in Mortata, we are dedicated to women's issues, and not about violence against men, but even in the case of violence against women, we deliberately try to focus all our efforts and energy on women's issues, rather than, for instance, like educating men and rehabilitating men and etc. And going beyond that, just a minute. And beyond that, talking about violence against men is kind of something that I have never heard of in Turkey, basically. And I'm sorry, because it's March 8th and we are here in Morçatı. Everyone is so excited. They couldn't even wait for me to finish it. I'm sorry.
And I don't want to be a spoiler.
No, but because we have a huge problem, you know, violence against women is a huge problem. And also maybe it's better to name it, we say men violence. How do you translate erkek şiddeti?
Male violence.
Male violence.
Yeah, male violence. So we use this term male violence. Of course, it can be directed to men as well, you know, but so it's inclusive in that sense. But we have this huge problem of violence against women. So, you know, we're there now, you know, there's a way. There's a, I think, long way that violence against men is a problem in Turkey, because if there is violence against men, but it comes from men again. So we can say that we use the term male violence generally. That includes that as well, let's say.
Maybe as a last note, there is a divorced men platform.
I was gonna say
First
that.
Fathers platform, yeah, and these kind of platforms are formed by men against feminist movements. So there's only one platform that I know that is formed by men called Yanındayız, which is mainly based on the private sector's position in terms of the gender equality issue. And this is a unique case, and there are some interesting jobs they are doing, but not direct non-violence. But other than that, all the men coming together are really acting against feminism in Turkey. So I hope that there will be some organized men trying to talk about this issue more, so that we can have alliance with them as well in the issue. So I think we need to find some subjects, male subjects, in the issue, so that we can find a solidarity together, like our case as Muslim feminists, maybe.
Thank you, Rümeysa, Melis, and Elif. And we have a couple of minutes left before the panel ends. And I would like to give the floor to Nacho for closing remarks and his take on today's conversation with these marvelous Turkish women.
Thank you, Tansu. Well, it's been absolutely interesting, and especially if you allow me, what the position of Rümeysa. This is absolutely crucial to have a movement like Rümeysa represents, because is dealing with the core of the conservatives or religious conservatives that could be separate from the real religion feelings, because there are more cultural adherences of the patriarchalism in the religion and itself. And I know very well what is happening with what we call the Catholic feminists in Spain, dealing with the problem of feminists into the Catholic Church, into what is the role of the women into the Catholic Church, because outside the Catholic Church there is no Catholic feminism, because the agenda is more or less the same outside this scope. What has been a very interesting thing, the only thing I would like to ask is a couple of things. The women's right is part of the broader agenda of the democratization, and it's the part of the set of rights to become a mature democracy. And I would like to disconnect this process from the accession process of the European Union. You have to decide as a society if you want to be a mature democracy, disregarding if that could only happen if you are a member of the European Union. The political will of being a democracy, it's on you. It's on Turkish society, it's on Turkish officials, it's on your country. And then you could be a member of the European Union or not. But I don't like this mental process in which we have to offer things to the European Union and we have to offer reforms just because they are asking us to meet some Copenhagen criteria. This is a completely different thing, and you have to deal with the issue of your wishes to be a mature democracy because you want to be a mature democracy, not because there is a prospect of being member of the European Union. And second, what some public opinion or official opinions in Turkey challenge is the mere existence of a set of universal rights. And this is a long discussion. When we ask about women's rights, other minorities' rights, religious minorities' rights, LGBT rights, are we accepting that there is a complete universal set of rights, or is just a colonialism? That means the Western countries are trying to change our mind, to change our view on family, to change our views. Our traditional way of thinking has been challenged because this is not a universal set of rights. This is a part of the Western colonialism. And we have to be clear on that. Do we accept that the women's right is part of this universal set of rights or not? And of course, from the European Union, we say yes, there is a universal right from just for the mere existence of being a person. And we have to deal and to challenge this rhetoric that oppose universal right with traditions, religion backgrounds, mindsets in different places. And this is my last contribution. I have been gladly following the discussion. I have run away from home to reach the parliament in a few minutes, but please, we are continuing our monthly meeting with NGOs. You are all invited on a permanent basis to join us. Sometimes we talk about freedom of press, sometimes about religion, sometimes about other issues. But this part of the agenda, we can never miss. We can never miss this part of the agenda. But this is the most, let's say, is the agenda more pungent at that very moment. And I repeat, the policies in Turkey related to the women's right is the proof of sincerity of this new apparent European bet of the authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nacho. And I'm so glad to be hosting this panel with all of you today. It's usually very unsettling to talk about women's issues on a Women's Day because I feel like, you know, there's only one day if we talk about this on Women's Day, but nevertheless, it's important to raise the issues, and it's important to have the solidarity. And I'm so glad we had that kind of a solidarity today from our panelists and also the participants of this panel. Thank you so much for being with us, Elif, Melis, Rümeysa, Nacho, Olga. Sorry, there were so many questions for the Turks. We couldn't get more of your work from the European Commission. Hopefully next time. And Javier, your contribution was also very valuable. Thank you to all of you. And also I would like to mention my dear colleagues Oliver and Azra from the International Press Institutes. This couldn't have been possible without their efforts. Thank you again, Human Rights Watch, Committee to Protect Journalists, European Commission, European Parliament, and we hope next year on the Women's Day, we have more uplifting topics to talk about. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.